While my panelists get down here, I'm just going to do a quick intro and some housekeeping items. So we are excited to have this second session, session 2, Contemporary Issues in Alumni Affairs panel discussion. We're really excited to engage in this conversation. We're going to have some initial discussion and then we're going to be taking questions after. So please hold your questions until they've chatted a little bit first, and then I'll be running around with the mic so you can continue the conversation as well. We do have time constraints out, as we know, and dinner is immediately following this. So we still have the whole conference, so you can find people afterwards. We'll share email addresses as well. So hopefully we'll get to your questions, but if we don't, there's still a lot of time to engage with them. All sessions are being recorded and will be uploaded to the CAMP website at the end as well. So if you missed something or want to share something, you'll be able to see this again. So I'm excited to introduce our panelists. So first I'd like to welcome Laura Bundrick, the Assistant Vice President of Development and Membership Services of the University of South Carolina Alumni Association. We have Jenny Carlson, the Director of Alumni Relations for Adrian College. Ryan Edmonds, the Assistant Director of Student Programs for the Kansas University Alumni Association. And Jeff Sheldon, the Associate Executive Director of Marketing and Business Relationships for the Nebraska Alumni Association. I want to give them plenty of time to chat, but their full bios are in the app, so if you want to learn more about them, you can check it out there. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Jess Dunlow, the Assistant Director of Affinity Networks for the UNC Charlotte Alumni Association, who will be moderating today's conversation. Take it away, Jess.
Thank you so much, Kylie. And also, yes, we know we're the only people standing between you and food, so hopefully this will be a really engaging conversation and session for you. But as Kylie said, my name is Jessica. I go by Jess, so you can all just say that. I'm going to be moderating this panel, and I want to thank all of the panelists for also working with me to help curate some of the questions and topics we're going to talk about. So please note that this session is designed to be politically neutral, and that discourse on political stance or positionality should be avoided even when you're asking questions. So the discussion will be addressing all of the things going on right now in 2025, and it's designed to assist alumni professionals to design, deliver, and adapt efforts right now. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I want to start off with something all of us can relate to, and that is the uncertainty of funding resources. Jenny, I know you are a one-woman powerhouse at Adrian College, so can you tell us how current economic climate has affected your budget and operating?
Yeah, so can everyone hear me? So we have never been a dues or non-dues association. Once you graduated Adrian College, you're an alumni, you're in the Alumni Association. So we've never had those to be a part of our budget. We are enrollment driven. So obviously, as most of you know, our biggest thing right now is the high school students not wanting to attend college. So with us being enrollment driven, our budgets are already set for the year based on what comes in. I have my own alumni budget, and then the VP has a development budget. Obviously, all of mine goes towards alumni engagement. He does help out in certain areas. We do partner on things, but that's kind of our biggest economic thing right now is the lack of high school students going to college.
Thank you. I will say Kansas University and the University Alumni Association at Kansas has a much larger structure. Ryan, has your office experienced similar impacts to your budget and operations?
Oh, I got so nervous turning this on, thinking my girl's gonna work. But hi everyone, I'm having the privilege. That was my anxiousness of the day, is that the microphone going to work. This is my beautiful face that I've not updated in 4 to 5 years. I wanted to quickly say, because my title may not be conducive, and one thing I've been sharing with a lot of, especially with our new campers, is please approach people, ask those questions based on their functionality. There's some things in here that are like, why is the assistant director of just student programs? It does not encompass. Really, for me, I really engage any of our students from perspective from middle school all the way up to age 30 and younger with our new alumni engagement, everything from homecoming, our student engagement, student leaders, young alumni, commencement campaign, and kind of everything all in between. So yes, was I over at the section that said wearing multiple hats? Correct. But I get my friends over in student alumni. But I wanted to provide that context. At KU, we are a 501c3 independent from the university. We do receive a small amount of state funds to the association, but it is predominantly self-funded. We are considered an affiliate organization, just similarly with our Kansas Athletics, our University of Kansas Health System, and also our foundation, which is called CAMMP Endowment, just giving broader context. I think for us, a lot of you have probably been in Lawrence within the last couple of years. We did open up a brand new building at the beginning of 2023. And I think that was for one thing we've been trying to really utilize is having more revenue streams for our association. We're thankful that a lot of what our president Keith, which many of you all have met, has been really strong in pushing for diversifying those revenues, especially whether it's a change in leadership as our chancellor, Kansas Board of Regents, what's obviously current right now. We've been thankful that he's been trying to really set the tone in future plans, whether it's adding assets, reevaluating those costs. A lot of what my colleague Brett and his team really do the amazing work of trying to find ways to amplify our engagement. I will say for us, we really heavily utilize our career-based engagement programming, whether that's business directory, student to alumni engagement, mentoring programs, anything that we can kind of really incorporate that annual giving value into that. As something I know we are really trying, whether it's shared services. As many know, we just launched our annual giving transition July 1st, so we have ended membership. We are starting annual giving July 1st. If you have questions, I'm going to direct you towards Brett, because he's very, very smart and knows a lot more of that than I do. But I think one thing we would think about is with our affiliate partners, I would say we are fortunate that a lot of people across our enterprise are trying to really have shared services and shared costs, whether it's technology, spaces. When we have a large conference coming into the university, we're replacing that with venue locations. I think that's one thing that we try to also actively share and promote is how can you leverage your campus partners to really have some of those shared costs, because that will reduce it from a lot of different standpoints.
Thank you. So I know that at UNC Charlotte, we're expecting the budget cuts to probably hit us as well. But I know that there are other ways to engage alums beyond the monetary, aspects for budget cuts. And so with the varying pressures for higher education in 2025, and with the purpose, even though our other presenter did not like that word, being to continue alumni engagement and marketing and communication success, Laura, has the University of South Carolina Alumni Association begun or previously started to strengthen the coordination across campus?
Yes. So probably, I would say within the last 3 to 4 years, we have really made a very targeted effort to make sure, so similar to Kansas, we are also a 501c3 separate, we're affiliated, but I think that makes it even harder because you can kind of be viewed as completely separate from the university and not get included in some things. And so we've made a lot of strides in the last couple of years to make sure, one, our CEO is included from the top down in a lot of those communications across campus. So making sure that she is sharing information and presenting at our board of trustees meetings, which sounds so basic, but we were not doing that before. Communicating with other entities on campus, the Department of Student Affairs, we hadn't been working with them. We just were not doing, candidly, we're not doing a great job of really communicating across campus. And so that is probably the biggest change we've made recently, is making a concerted effort. So from our CEO, all of us really have different areas that we're working to continue to develop and evolve relationships. And one thing I'll say that I think has been super important for us, similar to alumni associations, I know we struggle with staffing and staff changes. That also happens on campus. So you may have a relationship with somebody in one department and then they're gone or they go to another department. And so just continuing to keep those relationships strong so that the Alumni Association is included in any kind of communication, being aware of what the university is doing from a central communications standpoint. So we have a staff person that also sits on that committee and goes to those meetings every week, which includes everybody that is leading communication out from the university. university, so we're also sitting at that table. So I think those are my two biggest things to help kind of sort of bridge this gap that we may be seeing from budgets to help amplify what's happening on all levels at the university. You can't do that if people don't trust you and you don't have a relationship with them, so they're not gonna come to you to then communicate out. So that's really important, and then just having a seat at the table where, you know, where it makes sense in those big central communications meetings, knowing what the giving day communication is gonna look like so that you're sharing the same thing, like it's just trying to keep everything as centralized as possible.
Jeff, how does collaboration look at Nebraska?
Like a number of folks have already said, we have a number of staffers. Our executive director is one of them. We have another staffer who sits on what's called the Chancellor's Cabinet at Nebraska. So they get a real bird's eye view of decisions being made across the campus, which is good. I think we also have a reputation on our campus of being connectors and collaborators. We have venue spaces we manage where we are able to work together with lots of different parts of our campus. Myself and a couple other staff members of the Nebraska Alumni Association are on a body called the Staff Senate, which is kind of like an organizational advocacy body that goes all across campus. So we're all involved in talking about problems, talking about issues all across our campus. So I feel now we are more connected to campus than we probably have in the 6.5 years that I've been at Nebraska. Since I started, but you know, we are, even though we, like Kansas to an extent, are a largely self-funded organization, we're still part of our university, and so we feel the same things that happen all across our campus. So just like a lot of you at Nebraska this year, they announced there's going to be a budget cut this spring. Our legislature is real salty about the state budget. Our governor is going to try to cut $500 million out of our state budget next year, and we have to institute a $20 million university budget cut this fall, which led the president of our university to send a message out through the chancellors that nobody was getting a raise this year. Not a cost of living increase. And don't listen to Ethan, he got one. But we had to respond to that. And I know this is a conversation that's focused on mission, and I want to keep it there, but also, like, let's address the elephant in the room too, that what this means is your associations have less money to invest in people, less money to invest in you, and that really sucks. It sucks for people who manage teams, it sucks for people who work for alumni associations, and maybe some of you are out there now being like, man, I love this job, but I could use a different one where I might get a cost of living increase. And like, that doesn't make you a bad person. So we should all kind of approach these conversations with our staff, with the other people here in this room, with a lot of empathy and understanding, because there's a whole lot of people on college campuses across the country who are, you know, having to swallow some really bitter pills.
Thank you. I will say, for context, I am working on a research paper, and the average alumni engagement and advancement professional only stays in the field for an average of 3 years. So when we're talking about investing in people, and that it's important. So, but before we move to question 3, I know that cross-campus collaboration has to be huge for you, Jenny, as a one-woman show. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so every department that most of you probably have housed underneath your alumni association, that is what covers our whole entire institution. So we work with marketing for all of our marketing materials, but they also have to do everything across campus. They do all the stuff for admissions, they do all the stuff for some of the athletic stuff. But as far as collaborations go, we've actually used the students a lot. This year we had a professor that started a class on networking, and so it was a group of seniors, and their final project was a networking project, and they actually called me in to do an alumni event with them. So it was really fun because they were in control of the event, and I just helped push it along, but it was probably one of our best ones attended, by the students, because we had many ambassadors on campus getting them to go to these things, whereas before, when we would run a similar event between myself and career planning, it would be like, oh my gosh, please have 10 people show up. And we would have alums there, and where are the students, and then it reflects on us. So one of my key messages to them was, you better have students at this, because we will get the alumni there. But it just really worked, and the alums loved it. They were so engaged, and it just helped with the cost. The students actually had the cost in their class budget. So it gave us another event of getting the alums on campus. But yeah, lots of cross groupings when it comes to projects for us and different departments. And we also get very creative with some of our events because we don't have big budgets. So we do a lot of and I know a lot of people do, but we do the AC nights at the big stadiums for our professional teams. So we get very creative of how to work with other things to make our events good.
Thank you. Scott, did you write down that stuff about the networking thing? Yeah, we're gonna take that. So, thanks for sharing. So, as someone who works with alumni affinity groups, and for those, for us, affinity at UNC Charlotte is for shared experience and shared interest groups. The current trend of rolling back programs and initiatives across higher education that are considered to be related to DEI is something that is currently top of mind. And I want to shout out Matt for asking a question about that earlier in the keynote. So Ryan, how has Kansas Alumni Association had to reframe or redesign programs in response to legislation directives that limit certain types of identity-based outreach?
I knew it wasn't anxious, just kidding. So context, I do not directly manage all of our affinity-based networks. Asterisk. We do have an individual staff member, that is her job. For the majority of ours, we do have some affinity networks that maybe just due to what they are, whether that's our Kansas City board of directors, mine would be my young alumni, just because I'm already doing the general alumni. So we do have some of those pockets that are maybe just off tide, but Ms. Kelsey, she's on our team, work very hand in hand, so this is not me speaking on behalf of her, but just context. For us, I mean, obviously we are state funded, so our number one thing is going to be following suit with what our general university and what's coming out of our Office of Public Affairs, the Chancellor's office. Even so speaking, within the last hour while we were sitting, there was more communication being shared just in terms of, what is expected as we approach the next fiscal year. And so I know for us, our number one thing is to follow in suit with what our main university is going to push out. Obviously, we have different affinity groups, from veterans, our key Black alumni network that is commonly known. We have a Hispanic alumni network, young alumni that's being developed, an Endicott Society for retired faculty members. I believe we had an indigenous population being developed. I don't think it ever got fully formed, but we had some in the works, is per se what I'm saying. And so obviously we did the first, what most of us probably had to do was go through website, what's the shared language, where do we need to maybe revisit, and a lot of that was directive that we were just really trying to follow in suit was being pushed out from our Chancellor's office. But still allowing opportunities to push folks towards ways they can still engage, and maybe that isn't, those identity centers aren't what they're at the foremost of their interest, but how those can still be shown in different spaces. For example, we have what we call the JHawk Career Network, an umbrella term for all of our career-facing programming. We have a platform called KU Mentor Plus. It's through the PeopleSoft system and platform. We really heavily promote our students and our alumni to really get engaged into those different industry populations and find a mentor, find a student you want to mentor, find the alumni that has that awesome job or role that maybe you can potentially go into, because a lot of those identity-based conversations are probably going to get pulled up into them. And obviously that's not something we are going to be able to first at the foremost share and replicate and expand on, but we can give the platform, the space, the initiative for students to navigate that, because that's in their own evolution. And I think for us, as we continue to develop programming for all Jayhawks, is really what we're trying to lean into. We all talk about lifespan. For us, the lifespan of the Jayhawk, and just really trying to incorporate how can we have touch points all across the way, what are those interactions, but we've heavily just more and more continue to get into that mentoring, career-based programming, just because we see high value, there's strong interest. A lot of them are like, oh yeah, duh, I can give that back. So it's a quick grab for us as well. But I think for us, really just trying to be strategic of how we're not losing that value, but just more so how can we maybe give more initiative for the students, and that's something we're really heavily trying to push into. And for context, we're at 400,000 global alumni, so really trying to push into that scope, especially with, we're 40 miles from Kansas City, that's obviously our large population. We have Wichita, Salina, and some of our awesome communities in the state of Kansas, but how can we still bring that to our regional and national networks and still maintain that value?
Thank you. So Jeff, how has Nebraska Alumni Association responded to these directives?
Yeah, this was not easy for us. We got whiplash from it, honestly, because we invested a lot of time and resources into creating affinity networks. And with our alumni association, that's an Alumni of Color network, it's a Pride alumni network, we have one for international students, and some other long-standing ones like our ROTC and military veterans, and a couple others that don't necessarily fall under the same kind of microscope as maybe those first ones that I mentioned. And we had a staff member who really advocated for this, so much that we added, I think, Chief Diversity Officer to their title, and there was an Office of Diversity and Inclusion on our campus that worked out of our Chancellor's office that we did a lot of coordinated programming with. And then that office got shut down and like totally disbanded, and the people who worked in that either sought other opportunities or were placed somewhere else on campus. And we had to take a hard look at how we were branding these groups, because we had called them under the umbrella Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at Nebraska. And we were told that, hey, that name probably needs to get changed. I feel like we are fortunate that we advocated for these programs themselves, because we recognize how important they are to meet our alumni where they are, and go back to our culture discussion, like in the ways that they view themselves that are important to them. So we did not change that, but we did start talking about things in more of a framework of community building and belonging. And so I think it was suggested by some campus leadership to, hey, everyone needs to take a look at their websites and make sure the word diversity doesn't appear in them. And we're like, that's painting with too broad of a brush. Like, let us go in and do things our way, and we promise we're not gonna embarrass you and put you under more of an unwelcome spotlight. But what we found was really important was we needed to communicate with these groups of alumni, our Alumni of Color Network and our Pride Alumni Network, right away, to be like, we are not going to pull resources back from this. This is still a priority of ours, and these groups are so really important. We just might have to talk about them in different ways, and that feels really crappy to say, and I'm sorry, I hope you understand that, but that was how we had to approach it.
Yeah, it was very similar for us, and you notice I said shared experience and instead of shared identity. But since I've named the big 3-letter acronym, I want to hear from all of our panelists for this one. Have you noticed shifts in alumni engagement? I know you mentioned, Jeff, some backlash, either support, pushback related to programs or speakers considered to be controversial. And I want to start with Laura.
Sure. So I'll start with just 2 examples. So, wow, they're going to be really different examples, but we're gonna dive in. So last football season, Trump came onto the field as a guest of our governor. It had nothing to do with us. It was at a football game. Literally had nothing to do with us. We got a lot of feedback from that, and a lot of questions, including some folks saying they were not going to continue to donate or be a member or support or whatever. And so our strategy was really, we knew this was happening approximately like 24 hours before it happened, so we weren't really able to do anything in advance. But on the back end, our strategy was to make sure we aligned with the university and kind of knew what they were saying, and that everyone in the building was equipped to kind of respond to questions. We didn't anticipate everybody would be able to say this, this, and this. We just said, here's what you do if you get somebody that calls in with this kind of complaint, or one of your volunteers, comes to you and says, why did this happen? Why, we kind of try to provide everybody with a resource, and that resource all rolled back up into the university. So it's basically like a centralized, kind of like a complaint line, so that we didn't have to handle it. We could just say, okay, if this call comes in, you send them to here. Bottom line, like, it had nothing to do with us, and we were able to distance ourselves from it, so that was helpful. So that's one example, and I think what was important there was just kind of recognizing that people are gonna have, it's gonna happen. It's a political, that would have been right before the election. Yeah, so we were also in the election cycle too. So anyway, I think just recognizing, what the impact can be, and try to be as, responsive as possible. The worst thing you can do is say, well, we don't hear what you have to say, or we don't want to hear your complaint, or whatever. The the other example I have, so we're gonna go on a completely different, so we have an LGBTQ plus council. We asked them sort of preemptively to some DEI initiatives to, remove the word, drag from, so they have an event that they do at homecoming, it's a brunch, it's a drag brunch, but we asked them to remove the word drag from that. And really, and this kind of goes into the next question, so I'm sorry, but really what we were trying to do there is get ahead of issues and really kind of protect that council, honestly. Because the worst thing that would happen is then it becomes this bigger thing and the whole event gets kind of put under a microscope or even canceled. And so we worked with the volunteer leaders of that council to communicate with them really clearly, like why we're doing this, not just, oh, this is a directive, you have to do this. It was, here's the reason why, and here's why this is gonna be really best for the council in the long run. And like you said, like it kind of just sucks. Like I hate that's just what happened. And that was kind of our way to say, like, we recognize that these things are changing, and we recognize that this event is gonna become more than anybody wants to deal. Like, we don't want our volunteers to have to deal with that, frankly. And so here's how we feel like we can kind of preemptively get around that. So those are just sort of two examples. I think communication obviously is always the biggest thing, as much as you can do.
Right, thank you for those examples. Jenny?
Yeah, so we had Riley Gaines as our commencement speaker, which obviously caused a lot of different conversational pieces on social media. We got our donor calls that are never gonna, donate again, they're not coming back to campus, but after we really went back and looked at it, it was probably under 10 that called and complained that way. We actually got new donors, people who had never engaged with our campus before, and from the last 2 years, we've had the highest record-breaking donors in a fiscal year. So as much as we thought it was gonna affect, it actually went the opposite direction.
Ryan?
It's working. Yeah. We haven't had, so I think, thankfully, asterisk, we directly ourselves as the association didn't have any direct, I guess, change or backlash from it. I think any time that, it's typically a lot of times over social media, people expressing their opinions, their values, what we talked about belief an hour ago, but a lot of times it was very much directed toward either the individual department or the individual program, college that the issue to them is coming out of. And so I think for us, I think ever since the beginning of really the administration and when a lot of, the campus was really trying to start, what is our future planning, there was a huge, strong commitment between all the affiliate organizations with main campus of we need to have a shared approach, shared language, and I think I really give more kudos to our president and the chancellor and president of foundation, just to really trying to say if we're going to approach these different discourses or abruptions in our programs, is how can we have it effectively, but also what's an efficient timeline. Obviously, there's things that happen on social media that we may either have to dive into, whatever the case may be. I think at least the approach has been the same. Communication pops up from all channels, and it's shared. There's still context. We still explain the outcome, what a win. It's not that there was a final decision made and then we move on with our day. I think there was a shared language of this is our unified approach, and I think that's benefited us in those situations where there was anger from an individual because they didn't like the outcome or video they saw, even if the video was accurate or not. So I think a lot of, I give kudos to our content specialist who manages our account stated, because she does the brunt of that work, but really kind of re-emphasizing that. But I think thankfully for us, we've been kind of missed from one of them recently.
So what I'm hearing is having a standard operating procedure or standard reaction for employees and individuals to have. So Jeff, how does Nebraska handle all of these things?
And I'm so sorry, can you restate the question just briefly?
Absolutely. So it's, have you noticed shifts in alumni engagement, whether it's support or pushback related to programs happening or speakers that have come on campus, and how you manage those interactions?
You know, a little bit, but honestly not as much as you might expect. I feel like in my 6.5 years at Nebraska, somebody's always gonna be mad about something. And how you choose to handle that is up to you. One example that comes to mind is we have our annual awards dinner in April, and our chancellor's office decides who wins a public service award that we award, so we don't really have any say in that, but we're the ones who presents the award. This year it went to one of Nebraska's United States senators, and when we promoted that on social media, like we did all the other awards, we got a lot of feedback on that. Same things that a lot of other people have indicated, I'm never giving you a dime again. We probably didn't in the first place. But like, your concerns are valid, and frankly, I thought they were valid too. It really more led to us having an examination of like, why do we decide the award in this way? Is there a way that we can have maybe a little bit more ownership over it? But yeah, I think what I've heard from the rest of the panelists is like, everyone gets the right to their opinion, and everyone wants to hear that that opinion is heard, and they're not necessarily asking for you to change your programming or your behavior based on it. They just want to, they wanted to have their say, and our communication specialists are very good at arming our leadership with language that puts that forward.
Thank you. And to Laura's point earlier, the next question is, you know, some might say that we're in alumni relations, that we are professional pivoters. I would put like a cool Ross Geller like gif, but I didn't. So how has your alumni associations had to adapt or pivot communication practices in order to reflect evolving expectations for institutional transparency and accountability? Jenny, can we start with you and Adrian College?
Yeah, so our messaging comes from the senior staff team. That's where it starts, and it comes down from there. One of the biggest things as a group is communication. Every time we discussed the question, it was communication. For us, we're a liberal arts school, okay? And with the fewer students coming to colleges, we had 0, 1, 2 potential majors in history, theater, philosophy, and religion. So we had to restructure. We had to look at departments. We had to look at new majors. We had to offer new majors for what these students want now. And there was a ton of pushback. So with the communication piece, when the alums would call in, oh my gosh, my college is no longer a liberal arts, and we would talk through the process and say, hey, you know, this is really what's happening, because the people who were really upset, they were spreading a completely different story for us. So once they would call and listen and talk to our VP, and our VP would tell them, we're not getting rid of this, we're not getting rid of our liberal arts, we're pivoting. We are pivoting to make this work for this next generation, because we don't have theater majors that are coming. We don't have, you know, the religion majors. It's still there. They still get that as part of their liberal arts education. It's just not necessarily a major anymore. And I think that was one of our big ways of being transparent, because in the beginning when it first happened, I mean, we had news stations, we had faculty on the news, we had them putting students on the news. There was a lot of stuff, and then about 2 weeks later, apology notes were coming in, and those students were embarrassed that they got put in that position. So I think, again, key factor, communication.
Laura, have you had any experience with this at South Carolina?
Yeah, I'll just briefly kind of touch on, one of the things that came to me after we talked about communication is who is communicating. So I think just being aware of, for us at least, we have maybe some less seasoned staff that, you know, are interacting with some of our clubs and councils. And it's really not fair to them to put them in a position where they're trying to field questions from a volunteer and feel a little bit of pressure, or, you know, whatever the case may be, regardless of what the issue is. And so kind of helping prepare them to have, you know, how they respond if a volunteer is upset about something, or if they need to communicate differently, and then when to elevate that, I think is something that's, we have found has been super important. So when we've had some issues, as we all have, you know, how do they handle that, and not making them feel like, you know, that can be think, just continuing that communication, but also helping them know, we're, you know, senior staff or whoever that is here to support you. You're not on your own to try to convince this volunteer that, you know, whatever is happening is okay, so.
Thank you. So the council, so CASE, I think we're all familiar with CASE, right? So they recently released a guide for institutions to share with their alumni for higher ed, so alumni can advocate on behalf of institutions and higher education as a whole, because alumni are our greatest resource. So how are you leveraging alumni volunteers as strategic partners during times of change, rather than just wanting them to come to events? Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I think for a lot of us, coming out a little bit more of the heavier times of the pandemic, we saw a huge dip, especially with some of our graduating classes, depending on what cycle they were graduating in, depending on high school. And I think for us is really trying to create a volunteer hub. That was something they previously had, and we're still previously creating. It actually kind of relates back to the DEI question from earlier. Was we did have an office that was inclusion and belonging. They were restructured to be the Office of Community Impact, and so they are working closely more in partnership with another office that is not in the same division. This office has been pre-existing called the Center for Service Learning. A lot of what they handled was civic engagement, voter registration, awareness, education, outreach, but they also do community outreach, volunteerism, the whole 9 yards. And so for what that's kind of transpired to be is an opportunity for us to kind of have a more centralized volunteer hub to be able to have a better place to start funneling in a lot of that. Student boards can go to one place to talk about volunteerism, where it's submitting hours, getting involved however they can. A lot of our national network involvement was either through their respective Facebook pages, or within our Wichita and Kansas City, their respective board of directors. A lot of times that's friends of friends, people who show up at events, so it's your social network, but finding a better way to kind of have a system, standard operating procedure, going back to that. That's something we're actively trying to create, because I think we're really trying to have, especially on our, if anyone has boards for larger networks, how to utilize, yes, their own network, but have more representation of your broader alumni audience. So for example, on our Kansas City board, it is our largest network. I think 7 of our new incoming board members are all under the age of 30. Historically, we maybe got 1, maybe 2 on that board, so really trying to change the shift of, if we haven't had that representation in the last few years, how can we at least start to get people to see themselves into these areas? And a lot of that comes into your student and new alumni engagement is what we're really investing in. And so what my area has developed a lot more is this commencement campaign is once students return back from spring break, where is their, wherever you are, we will come find you, getting engaged with them, whether or not they choose volunteer, at least they've been presented information, they've had a conversation about it, and allowing them to have more pipelines, and really trying to backtrack a little bit, but future-proof some of that. And we started that, that heavy intentional communication this year, so we're gonna obviously start to track that, but I think for us is trying to have a better system of tracking it. We really didn't have a centralized hub, not even for ourselves, but for the university as a whole. And I think that will allow us to be better communicators, because outside of Kansas City and Wichita, who have their own respective staff members, all of our national networks across the country is managed by one person. Outside of affinity networks and other programs, but majority of the city, the volunteers in there, same as Nick, does phenomenal work, and that's been a long-term project with him. So I think it's for us is to, in staffing capacities, I think that's a big thing. And how can you make sure that whether you have succession planning, being able to have those relationships maintained long-term is going to help you, and that's what we're actively trying to do.
Thank you. And I know, Laura, you said South Carolina is leveraging volunteers in a different way now, or pivoted a little bit. Uh-oh, now her mic's not working.
Hello, there we go. Sorry. I think it's really just continuing to your point, just to continue to build those relationships with volunteers. And, I think part of the problem that we've seen is that volunteers get a little disenchanted. Is that bad to say? But I think they do, because we ask them to do a lot. And so just making sure that we're continuing to show them, we're stewarding them. I mean, we're showing them appreciation, and we're making sure that they feel included in the process. I think it's really hard when you come to them and say, okay, you know, we're in Columbia, we've decided that we're gonna do this event, but you're gonna do it and do all the work. So I think probably the biggest thing there around just kind of like accountability and transparency is keeping them involved in the process as early as possible, and making them feel, they're gonna feel accountable if you include them in the process.
Thank you. So we have one more question for the panelists before we go to a Q&A. So I was having a conversation with our student engagement coordinator in our office, and that's where this question came from. So during giving days and giving campaigns, a lot of students seem to be asking why all of the donations that come in go to athletics. So we all know they don't, but how do each of your alumni associations combat this perception that all donations and funding is going to athletics? And I'm going to start with Jeff.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know that that perception exists among students on our campus, but I admit that the whole concept of student philanthropy is something that Nebraska is really just getting started in. And we have a couple of our staff members who sat on like a student philanthropy task force, and I will be 100% honest, like it's something that makes me feel icky at times, and I'm supposed to be one of the flag wavers for this. And so I think one of the things we try to do is tell the story of philanthropy, acknowledging the context that we're at like record high levels of student debt and record high levels of tuition. So it's hard to see like how exactly has this made this better. But I think what students do understand are some kind of like one-to-one comparisons about like, because of donors, like these scholarships exist. And maybe this is a scholarship that you have, and I know it doesn't cover your full cost of attendance, but it does take a bite out of it. And you know people who are on these scholarships, and those are all funded by philanthropy. And so just a small gift now can make a difference. And I think we're really chipping away at creating some positive feelings towards student philanthropy. And like if our foundation, our advancement office has not found the silver bullet for that yet, I don't feel bad that I don't have one. I know there are universities out there that do this already. It's like part of the culture of their university, and I'm very jealous of you where that exists. So if you have any ideas about how to ingrain that culture in your student population, please let us know. But I mean, I think you have to acknowledge to students like the circumstances they're facing, but also then show them, hey, this is how we can help the next generation of students. Because we know that this generation of students now are very, very philanthropically minded. But they want to give to causes where they can have a direct impact and that they are passionate about. And it's hard to get people excited about an institution where their families may be going into $100,000 in debt, then to go there, and they're getting parking tickets. So we are continuing to build those relationships and fight that fight.
Jenny, what about for you?
So mine will be a two-part answer. So the first one is our campus is 72% athletes. We know our brand. We have 50 plus teams. This summer we just put in an indoor facility. There's a championship center going on our hockey rink, and on social media when we're pushing it out, glad that's where my tuition's going. Glad that this is what I'm paying for. We are working on videos. We're working on educational videos that talks about how, donor funded, this is where things work, this is how scholarships work, so that not only the students can see it, but also so that donors who don't know that are able to do that. Now into the giving days, one of my other hats that we talked about is athletic development. So I'm in charge of all of athletic fundraising and development for Giving Day, and
You must be insanely busy.
so, but we offer it across campus. We push it out to our Greeks, we push it out to our student organizations, we push it out to our different departments. Athletics has to do it, right? They have to participate in this day, and I will say their students, we have some competitions, so it has developed the philanthropy for the students because there's competition for most donors raise, and so the $5 donations from everyone on a sports team adds up. I mean, and then they're calling mom and dad, and then they're, you know, doing all these things because they're trying to do that. But 2 years ago, the teacher education department wanted to send their students to a conference. The conference was $25 a person, so we made a whole campaign around, if you support $25, we can send a student, you know, to this conference. And that group was educated on the thing, so they pushed it out to families, they pushed it out to alums, and they won the academic challenge for it. So I've really tried, that's one of the areas we get a little pushback from, but it's not because we don't try and help them to fundraise for this or use Giving Day in their way, it's just, it hasn't bought in on that side and it's not required, whereas with athletics, I'm allowed to say, not gonna cut it, you have to participate in this day. So I would say that's one of the things for us, is just across the institution. But it is, we're hoping that now these young alums will still give their $5 since they've maybe been giving it for 2, 3, 4 years. We're hoping that that's gonna transition over to alums and supporting Giving Tuesday, so.
Laura, how about at South Carolina?
I think I agree with you. I think we are chipping away. It is not something, I'm not super knowledgeable on the topic, to be honest with you, and I think it's something the university has really struggled to figure out. I think the focus on scholarships is probably where we have landed as a university that resonates the most and gives young alumni and students a way to feel like they're giving back to your philanthropic point. The athletic thing is interesting to me because I think if you ask students on campus, they would want their money to go to athletics, specifically NIL, which I know we're gonna talk about later. So it's an interesting kind of, you know, I think that is the world we're living in, and I think in a school where, you know, athletics is so important, although I had no idea, just learn something new every day. You know, I think they would want it to go to athletics, that if you ask them, they'd be like, sure, that's fine, put it in that NIL pot. So, you know, I think it's a kind of an interesting thing to sort of figure out as we move forward.
And Ryan, you work with students and young alums, so how about for you over at Kansas?
Actually, what you were talking about at Adrian College, we stuttered, sorry. Originally, funny enough, my original position that when I came into this role was to mainly focus on student philanthropy. There priorly we had our student group, our student leaders, and our student engagement, and we had a staff member. Our foundation had the same thing. They were called almost the exact same thing, minus one word. The foundation student group was obviously the education, the awareness, the getting student boards to participate. R was the alumni connection, leadership development, career networking. 2022, there was a shared service, so talking back of how we're trying to align and have some of those shared benefits. We essentially merged the two engagements into one, and that's what produced my original title. That since has changed quite a bit in a couple of years, but really the mindset was, how do we create more partnership between organizations, and how do we really get more students involved into our day of giving? We call it One Day 1KU in February. And I heavily lean into my student leaders. They were called the Student Alumni Ambassadors. I know other folks have the very same name, or variations of that. And really our goal was to allow students to be the peer leaders to their peers in how they do that education and awareness, but with also registering student organizations. So we did the same thing with like a leadership competition, different, we call them power hours, and those span across students, alumni, academic departments, the whole 9 yards. And that allowed us to have a really good partnership with our foundation. This past year was really year 2 of really revamping it. I'll say, for example, our goal was 10 student orgs. That's all we wanted. If 10 student orgs could sign up and just participate, that would be phenomenal, hands high. We had 32, and we were really excited about that, mainly because we really leveraged, hey, this is the story and the benefit you can, especially with our intramural and our sports teams. They showed up the absolute most. I love my students. They raised $100. Good for them. You know, 100 more than I didn't have. $50 was for me. They don't know that, but when you look at the leaderboards and who was showing up, it was really cool because a lot of them were fundraising for trips, getting to go to tournaments, just allowing them to be that identity of them that speaks to them the most.
Or for example, we have a program, it's called Launch KU. It's essentially that opportunity to have designated giving programs, but through our foundation, and we do it in partnership with them. And essentially, any student or faculty member can propose, hey, I want to raise this amount of money for this X project, help me do so. And so they have to have, their students have to be the initiators, they have to have a champion for it, there's a whole proposal list. Essentially, they work with the foundation and they have 1 month to raise that goal of theirs. It can be for whatever the case may be, as long as it's achievable. An example of this is we have, I'm assuming some other schools do, ours is called Jayhawk Motorsports. They build, the go-kart driving things, obviously something I do not do. But they do a launch gate project every single year, and that's the funds that they raise to build said vehicle. That has been entirely donor funded since before my time probably. And so I think for us was really leveraging of like, you have the autonomy to go out there and make that change of difference, allow us to be the catalyst to help you get there. And I'm very privileged to work with student leaders who can drive that way more than my intelligence can. But we've really tried to create different ways for the students to have that autonomy. Obviously it's had some buy-in from our foundation, buy-in from other student orgs, but really trying to change that. Yes, we are going through a major stadium renovation. Our new building was entirely donor funded. Does everyone know that? Probably not. But that's where we lean so much in that storytelling. Or right as you walk in the doors, you see donor names on the walls. How we do those recognitions, we are huge on that. There's displayed kiosks that talk about the story of how the building was made. And I'm sure obviously I'm not involved with the stadium being built, but that's a great example of they're going to do the exact same way so that people understand that this is, the community coming together for a plan that's not only going to benefit the university, but it's going to benefit the state. And that's something, the economic development is something we're really heavily leaning into. So.
Though I love to hear that you're utilizing partnerships with student orgs on campus. So there is actually a theory for philanthropy, and it's called philanthropic mirroring. And if people experience, like you said, if this is a scholarship or a fundraising effort that they've participated in or benefited from, they're more likely to then continue to give back to that specifically. And the student org thing is what's really helped at UNC Charlotte. It's at a much smaller scale. We didn't have 32 orgs sign up, but I think we had 10. And they funded all of their projects, so. I think we're gonna open it up for Q&A for our amazing panelists. I don't know where Kylie is. Oh, there she is. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. So you're saying we covered everything perfectly? Love it. There we go.
I think, Laura, this is a question for you. I mean, you mentioned a drag event. We got bit by that at the University of Utah. And then you also mentioned like the importance of being able to kind of project out, it's easier to, the problem with anticipating problems is if you fix it, there's no validation that you actually change something. So do you have anything helpful, any kind of like rubric or standard or something that you use to project maybe some problem areas or anything? I guess this could be for the whole panel, but I'm pointing at you because you brought it up.
Should have done that. I mean, I don't know. We do not have a rubric. There's no set, for these kind of things, these sort of political issues, I mean, you don't know what that exactly is gonna be. So in this specific example, we were really just trying to think about utilizing what we already know about our alumni and honestly our board of trustees and our campus and our donors and keep the list goes on, utilizing what we know to try to get in front of it. There was no well, if this happens and this happens. It was really, we feel like to the best of our knowledge, this is the best way to handle this. To your point, once you've made that change, it's hard to go back, but I think given what we've been continuing to see, sort of in the political conversation, I think it was the right move, because I think it's just gonna continue to go in that direction, and so kind of cutting that off before anything could happen that would then specific affinity council, I think was the right thing to do. I don't know if that's helpful, cause I can't tell you when this, like, X, Y, and Z, you know, I think you kinda just gotta get your collective minds together and try to use that experience as the resource to make a decision.
I want to offer just what I think is a little bit of a different perspective on that. And every school kind of has to take their own political temperature on this, but like, just my beliefs and my background, I hate the concept of pre-complying, of doing something that you don't have to do because you think you're gonna head off a bigger problem. And I actually really have a lot of admiration for the way our university has addressed some of the programming that we work with them on. We work with a student group on an event called Pride at Workplace, which is bringing together companies and business leaders and talking about, you know, LGBTQ issues in employment. And then we have another one that's run with our chancellor's office called Lavender Graduation. Maybe some of you all have similar programs where it's recognizing LGBTQ plus students who are graduating. And I was fully expecting those programs to get shoved in a drawer somewhere, and they weren't. And I think that shows that like pre-compliance can be malicious, and you're doing yourself no favors by, you know, trying to anticipate problems that don't yet exist. And so maybe that's what I would advocate for is, you know, don't solve a problem that isn't a problem, but maybe have a plan on what to do in case you get some pressure.
Contingency planning.
Thank you. I had a question for you, Ryan, on your student programs. At the CU Boulder Alumni Association, we have a fantastic student group called the Her Leadership Council, and we're always thinking about ways on how to bring them into the fold and other programming, whether it's chapters, advisory boards, etc. What's one piece of advice to start combining things, or maybe inviting them along to other programming that you do at your alumni association?
Think of what they would want me to say. Because really, I'd say two-part, one, cop-out answer, ask them. I think that's just very forthcoming just because we can, what I did, really long story short, this student group has been around at our organization, I think since the 60s, 70s, it's been around for quite some time. It's gone through some name changes, some restructuring that typically happens. This current model that we're operating as student alumni ambassadors is in its year 2, or going into the year 3, used to be called the Student Alumni Leadership Board, then Student Endowment Board, then it was the Student Alumni Association, and with a paid membership, it's all changed. Same thing with structures, what they want to do, programs left, programs come, they get involved in some things, they don't anymore. And I think now what has made sense with what the current offerings we do, I do lay it out on the table, what makes most sense to them. And I think the thing I leverage the most is what are just the unique opportunities that as the go-to alumni organization on campus, what can we leverage that allows them to have a more unique experience? So I think what's worked for us is, we have our annual board of directors come in, they do like days of meetings, there's a luncheon, we always offer the students to go to the luncheon, to network, we typically have a dean or someone come speak. So allowing them to be in the physical space now, are they having the most amazing, beautiful, life-changing conversations? No, the last time we went, they were talking about the dogs. That's awesome for them, but they're at least getting into a space to have a conversation with someone that they may not have had if they weren't in this role. We're unique, this may not be applicable, but for example, there is only one faculty teaching award across KU that is only led, nominated, evaluated by students. My students have the honor of having that. Granted, that's from absorption of things being unfunded anymore, so we just said, yes, we'll take it. But we've been able to expand that into, okay, how do we continue to make this in perpetuity, but then how do we still allow it to be a benefit for the students? So they entirely communicate, do the interviews of faculty members. We give about 400 nominations every single year. We do about 50 to 75 interviews. They interview, grade, award it, but we allow them to go on the football field. It's fun for them. And so that allows them to get involved. We try to do as much outreach with like our different chapters, but obviously geographic's difficult. So am I gonna bus 35 students to Wichita? No, that's gonna be wild. But I think allow them to lead that conversation, or try things that don't stick. I don't think it ever hurts to at least try it. It's probably not the most helpful of answers, but I think for us, our students, I've at least encouraged my students enough to understand that if you're going to represent in this role under this title, what do you want to get out of it and why do you even care to be a part of it, instead of just showing up and having it something on the resume. One thing that's helped with that is making it a little bit of a commitment toward that if they're involved in it, they're gonna have to like put where the money where their mouth is and show up, but not enough where it's overwhelming. So you have to find out what that amount of commitment is, and once you find that sweet spot, that's really gonna kind of break apart the people who are there because they want to advance their networking, their leadership development, because we've turned ours into a three-part of, there's a leadership curriculum I've developed, they do their event planning, the fun student work pieces, and then what's that ambassadorship to the program, and that was the final balance. But let them lead the charge. If they don't have ideas, lay it out on the table, use ChatGPT. I heard she's really great, so get some ideas. I hope that's helpful.
All right, thank you, everybody. I want to give a big round of applause to our presenters.